So I'm going to give a little information about peer review and what I'm expecting and what the goals are of peer review and what they are not. So when you're looking at your peers draft, I'm looking for a few things. For you to see whether or not they comprehended the primary source. So you should see that they are referencing one of the philosophers that we have studied this semester and that they are grounding their paper in quotes and explanations of those texts. That they have been able to reconstruct it and explain the argument coming from that philosopher with clarity, and that you can find a thesis statement of what they are going to argue in their paper. So this is not a statement of the conclusion of the argument they're reconstructing, but the thesis statement, of course, is their position on this topic. Additionally, they should be able to support that thesis that they have put in the intro paragraph with logical reasoning and evidence. So the question is why? Why am I asking you to do a peer review? Well, I think this actually develops skills on both ends of this. So for the reviewer, the skill, one of the skills you can develop here is locating the main ideas and supporting evidence for a particular claim or for a particular argument. This is something we've been doing all semester, but it's a really useful skill to continue to practice. Additionally, this helps you articulate clearly what you think about someone else's argument, and so you can practice your own writing skills in clarity and being concise in the kinds of questions that you pose to them and the comments that you make. I do say here both comments and questions because I think it's important for you to ask, right? Like your comments to them can be, I think this is what you're saying. Is this correct? Or have you thought about things this way? So that you're not just making comments about what is good and what is bad, but rather helping them think more thoroughly and more deeply through the topic that they are addressing. And I do think the collaboration piece here is really important, not the least of which because we are separated in terms of physical presence by a pandemic, but also because no matter what job you end up getting in your life, and whatever job you have now, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the kind of person you are, collaboration is a really important feature of this. And it's really helpful to learn how to give constructive feedback, because this helps build relationships with people and focuses on better efficiency and better productivity without being too negative, I guess one would say. In terms of the writing aspect of this is a really, really helpful skill that I think a lot of people struggle with, which is receiving and processing constructive feedback. Humans tend to kind of react in one of two extremes to this. I think you tend toward one of these extremes, one being overly critical of yourself, so not being able to receive positive feedback because you think what you've done is so terrible, and on the other end of that, being so defensive about what you've done that you can't receive any kind of constructive criticism. So doing this process helps work through some of those issues. Additionally, I think this helps develop a skill of discerning what feedback is actually most relevant to what you're trying to say. So it doesn't mean that every piece of feedback you get from your peer is necessarily relevant to what you're trying to do in your paper, but that's the work of the writer, is to discern which feedback is the most important and which feedback you should include. I mentioned this already, but in terms of in class, but I do think The process of drafting and editing and proofreading is a regular part of the practice of writing. There is no published author you've ever read that hasn't had to go through this process of drafting and editing. I know in academic papers, we treat them frequently, and I do say we because I have done this myself. We treat them as just little hoops we have to jump through in order to finish the class. And so you do it last minute and don't really think about it and just hope that it gets you the grade you need. But the process of writing and writing a good paper includes drafting and editing. So I'm building it into this course to get us into the practice and the habit of good writing skills. Okay, so that brings us to the how. As a reviewer, remember that your job is not to assess or evaluate a grade. So it's not your job to tell your classmate what grade you think they should get or what grade they did get on this. That is my job. That is not the reviewer's job. I also think it's really helpful to begin with a positive comment. So maybe they wrote a really interesting introduction, or maybe their thesis statement was really catchy, was really intriguing, and it set up the argument nicely. Maybe they did a really great job of explaining the argument because it had been, they explained it in a way you hadn't heard before. Whatever it is, begin with a positive comment. And then make sure that your comments are specific. If there's one thing that peer reviews tend to do, I should say one mistake the peer reviews I've read in the past have tended to make, it's that the comments really aren't specific. So the tendency is for you to just be like, oh, this paper's great, work a little on your organization or fix your thesis statement or, whatever it is, but it's like really general and maybe a sentence or 2 sentences long. What I'm looking for in this assignment is for you to provide specific comments about the content. So you can say, on the second page in this paragraph, I'm not sure what your main idea in this paragraph is. Could you clarify? Or when you reference, Frankfurt's definition of BS, you aren't clearly distinguishing it from how he defines lying, right? So like whatever the issue is, like make sure that you are providing specific comments. But the other piece of this is that you aren't to tell them how to revise it, right? So if you think there is revision possible, so something isn't as clear as it could be, something could be more organized, something is inaccurate in its interpretation or explanation, the job for you is not to tell them exactly how to fix it, but to ask questions and to provide statements about what problem you see. So if it's a problem of interpretation or accuracy, you could say, I think this is what you're saying Frankfurt's argument is about lying, but my understanding was that it was this. So you might go back and read, this page and see what you make of that. So don't tell them exactly how to fix it, but help them figure out maybe where to look in the readings or questions to ask that might help trigger some additional brainstorming. Okay. As the writer, make sure that you approach the review with an open mind. Like I said before, it is a tendency of humans to be on one extreme or the other, whether it be hyper defensive or hyper critical of themselves. So try to approach the review with an open mind. And so I say here, try to avoid being either too defensive about it, meaning like, oh, I have everything right, I shouldn't have to change anything, or too discouraged about it. I know a lot of people struggle with feeling confident in their writing. And here, I believe in this class, we all have important things to say, and we can all say them in a way that is clear, concise, and persuasively worded. And so I believe all of us are capable. So try not to approach this being too discouraged about your writing. Do reflect on what the reviewer has offered you in terms of comments, but don't feel that you have to incorporate them. Think about them, weigh how relevant they are to what your overall aim is, And if you have questions, you can reach out to them and ask them. If you have questions, you can reach out to me and I can help as well. When you are reviewing, these are the questions I do think you should think through. I have included them in the assignment for the student peer reviews. So the questions are, does the draft clearly communicate the author's point? So can you walk away from reading this paper knowing where the author stands on that issue, the author being your peer? Does the draft have a thesis? Does the draft clearly and accurately reference an argument we've read in class? Are the references to course texts cited, and are they cited properly? And has the author followed the instructions clearly? This might require you to go back to the assignment instructions if they have chosen a different topic than you, to read through what was required for that topic so that you can help them if they've missed one of those pieces that they were supposed to include. Okay. That's it. I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to reading your papers and working with you on these drafts.